The world has no respect for someone who constantly hands themselves away. From the very beginning, you were told that being warm is one of the highest virtues a person can carry. That if you remain open, generous, always available, always reachable, the universe will eventually match that energy and send it back to you. But look honestly at your own life. The more you made yourself available, the more people started treating your presence like a given. The more you broke down your own reasoning to help others understand you, the less they actually did. And somewhere in the quiet parts of your mind, a question started forming, whether being endlessly kind was slowly draining you of the very power you needed to live with dignity. When the stability of your inner world depends on how others respond to you, you are not truly free. Stoicism does not simply teach kindness. It teaches something far more radical. It teaches sovereignty, the kind of self-ownership that cannot be shaken by a delayed message, a cold tone, or the withholding of someone's approval. Real strength is not noisy. It does not beg for recognition. It does not follow people around hoping to be noticed. It is the controlled, quiet presence of someone who has decided they are enough, with or without external confirmation. And the moment that understanding settles inside you, the way you move through the world shifts completely. Here is a truth most people are too uncomfortable to speak plainly. The value of anything, including your attention, your time, and your presence, changes the moment access to it changes. This is not a judgment, it is simply how human perception operates. When something is always available, the mind stops registering it as special. Not because people are cruel by nature, but because the brain adapts to what it receives consistently. Your presence, your warmth, your effort. When they are offered without limit, without condition, without any sense of selectivity, they begin to blend into the background of someone's life. Like a song that plays continuously in a room. Nobody dislikes it, they simply stop hearing it. The difficult part is that many of us were raised to believe that constant warmth is how you earn closeness. Be patient. Be understanding. Be the one who always picks up. Be easy to access. But warmth that has no boundary does not deepen into love. Over time, it quietly transforms into expectation. And expectation, once it takes root, becomes the beginning of disrespect. You feel it in the moment your kindness stops being appreciated and starts being assumed. You feel it when the effort you put in only becomes visible the second you withdraw it. That is where a different kind of awareness begins. Not cruelty, not coldness in the harsh sense, but the clarity that arrives when you finally recognize you have been pouring from an empty place. Seneca once wrote that no one can live well who thinks only of themselves. But that principle cuts both ways. It also means you cannot live well when you constantly sacrifice yourself for the comfort of others. To give from genuine strength is noble. To give from the fear of losing someone's approval is desperation wearing the mask of generosity. The Stoic version of being cold begins exactly here. In the moment you stop measuring your own value based on the temperature of the world's response to you. And once that shift occurs, something inside you begins to move differently. You start to see how much of your daily behavior has been quietly shaped by the need to be liked. The fast replies so they do not think you are ignoring them. The lengthy explanation so they do not misinterpret your intentions. The softened opinion so the conversation does not become uncomfortable. You told yourself it was kindness, but in many moments it was anxiety wearing kindness's clothing. It was the fear of being misread, of being pushed away, of losing a connection. The Stoics called this attachment to external validation, and they recognized it as one of the greatest threats to inner freedom. This does not mean you become unfeeling or absent from life. What it means is that you begin to detach from outcomes. You bring full effort to whatever you are doing, but you release the desperate grip on how people respond to that effort. You care about the people in your life, but you stop allowing their withdrawal to collapse your sense of self. You give, but you do not beg for acknowledgement in return. That detachment is powerful, not because it makes you distant, but because it removes fear. Fear of losing the opportunity, fear of losing the relationship, fear of losing the version of yourself that others have grown comfortable with. When you operate from fear, people sense the urgency underneath your surface. When you are detached, your presence changes. You walk into rooms without scanning the faces around you for signs of approval. You hold eye contact without silently pleading for reassurance. You say no without constructing an entire argument to justify it. That calm, clean refusal, that simple boundary, carries more real authority than any explanation ever could. At some point, if you look honestly enough, you realize that so much of your overgiving was rooted in parts of yourself you never chose to examine. The part that dreads being unwanted, the part that quietly believes love is something that must be constantly earned through effort and availability. Carl Jung wrote that until you bring the unconscious into conscious awareness, it will run your life and you will mistake it for destiny. Many people genuinely believe it is just their fate to always end up drained, undervalued, or invisible in their relationships. But more often, it is a pattern, an unconscious habit of remaining too accessible, too accommodating, too afraid to pull back. When you bring that pattern into the light of awareness, you stop blaming your circumstances and begin taking responsibility for your own behavior. That is where genuine power lives. Not in controlling others, but in finally having clarity over yourself. This kind of coldness, properly understood, becomes a form of integration. You acknowledge your need for connection, it is human and it is real. But you refuse to allow that need to quietly erase you. As that awareness deepens, something changes in how you communicate with the people around you. You stop over-explaining. You stop entering arguments to prove your value. You say what is true and necessary, and then you allow it to settle without chasing the reaction. Your words become fewer but carry more weight. Your presence becomes quieter but lands more heavily. People may initially describe the shift as distance. They may say you seem different, but what they are actually sensing is stability. You are no longer swept along by every passing emotional current. You have found an anchor, and that anchor is what Stoicism has always been pointing toward: inner governance. A life moved by principle rather than impulse. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. Your warmth becomes intentional rather than automatic. You are no longer warm because you fear what happens when you are not. You are warm because you genuinely choose to be, and that distinction changes everything. When you smile, it carries sincerity. When you offer your help, it feels earned by the person receiving it. When you give your time, it feels like an actual gift rather than a default setting. The psychology of what people loosely call coldness is not about making your heart smaller. It is about protecting what is inside it. It is about understanding that real respect grows in the space where self-governance lives. You become less reactive, less dependent on applause, less rattled by the shifting moods of others. And in that space, you discover something unexpected. You have not become colder, you have become clearer. You are not detached from life. You are detached from the fear that was running it for you. And that clarity, quiet, steady, and unmistakable, is what makes people remember your presence long after you have left the room. If you are finding value in what we are exploring here, consider subscribing. Not as a reflex, but as a conscious decision to stay on this path. A commitment to choosing principle over impulse and self-governance over the constant performance of approval-seeking. You can see this psychology most clearly in the way people use language. When someone's inner world is uncertain, their outer communication becomes excessive. They write long messages to explain simple things. They add layers of softening before anything direct. They include apologies that were not necessary. They follow up before a response has even had time to arrive. This is not weakness, it is fear. Fear of being perceived incorrectly, fear of creating distance, fear of the discomfort that comes with silence. So they try to manage how they are seen through the volume and texture of their words. They attempt to close every possible gap in interpretation so that no one can find a reason to judge them or step back. But the more energy they spend trying to control perception, the more clearly they reveal that they are not at peace with themselves. The desire to be understood gradually becomes the need to be approved. And when approval becomes the goal of your communication, your freedom quietly disappears. Because now your words are no longer about expressing something true, they are about preventing rejection. This is the line that Stoicism draws, and it is uncomfortable to stand on at first. Epictetus said that if you wish to improve, you must be willing to be seen as foolish by others. That sounds like an insult. It is actually liberation. It means you stop investing enormous energy in managing how others interpret you. You stop contorting your communication to appear reasonable to every possible audience. You accept that some people will misread you regardless of how carefully you explain, and instead of chasing understanding in their minds, you build it firmly in your own. That is what it means to be emotionally self-sufficient. The ability to speak simply, act clearly, and allow others to receive it however they will, without rushing to correct, defend, or reassure. When you begin living this way, something shifts. Your sentences become shorter. Your language becomes cleaner. Your presence starts to carry more weight, precisely because it is no longer bending itself to accommodate everyone's comfort. People begin to sense that you are not performing for their approval anymore. And that stillness, that settled quality of someone who is not performing, has a kind of gravity to it. Consider the difference between a person who fills every silence with words and a person who speaks only when something genuine needs to be said. The first might read as warm and friendly, but their words lose their weight because they are everywhere. The second may seem quiet, even reserved, but when they speak, people listen. Silence is not the absence of something, it is a choice not to fill space. And when you become comfortable choosing silence, others feel it. They lean in. They pay closer attention. Not because you are performing power, but because you have stopped performing altogether. There is genuine dignity in restraint. There is a kind of strength in allowing your thoughts to exist without immediately surrounding them with explanation and apology. This is where coldness, understood in the way Stoicism intends it, stops being about distance and becomes about clarity. It is not the shutdown of emotion. It is the refusal to allow every emotion to pour into every conversation. It is the recognition that your worth does not move up or down based on how quickly someone agrees with what you have said. When you stop lobbying for your perspective to be accepted, you stand in it. And that standing, that rootedness, changes how you move. You respond when it is appropriate rather than reacting the moment something lands. You say no without following it with 3 paragraphs of justification. You express a different view without apologizing for having one, and people take notice, not because your voice is louder, but because you are steadier than everyone around you. This is not harshness. This is not cruelty. It is selectivity. It is the understanding that every word carries weight, and that weight matters, so you stop wasting it. You stop using communication as a tool to secure emotional safety and begin using it for what it was actually meant for, expressing something real. That shift is subtle, but it changes the entire texture of your interactions. Because once you stop performing for approval, you begin to actually exist in your presence. And presence is something that cannot be manufactured. It is felt. It is the quiet confidence of someone who does not need constant external confirmation to remain grounded. This way of moving reshapes your identity over time. You stop being the person who manages perception anxiously. You become the person who manages themselves. And self-management is at the very heart of Stoic discipline. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is practiced in the smallest moments. In the message you choose not to send. In the additional explanation you decide not to attach. In the silence you allow to breathe without panic. Each of these small moments accumulates. Together they construct a new internal standard. And as that standard deepens, so does the respect you naturally receive. Not because you demanded it, but because you stopped trying to extract it. Here is where the psychology becomes more precise and possibly uncomfortable. Every human being is shaped from early childhood by patterns of reward and consequence. We learn what behaviors get us warmth and what behaviors create distance. We learn to smile when we want to be held, to speak up when we want to be heard, to stay quiet when we want someone to notice. Over years, the nervous system maps these patterns and begins to connect emotion with anticipated outcome. And so when someone can trigger a reaction from you, anger, guilt, fear, jealousy, urgency, they have discovered something significant. They have learned that they can move you, not always intentionally, not always maliciously, but the pattern exists, and the body remembers it. When a particular tone causes you to panic, that tone becomes a mechanism. When criticism makes you scramble to defend your worth, criticism becomes a leash. And once someone, consciously or not, understands where your reactions live, they do not need to push with great force. They only need to know where to press. When you stop reacting automatically, you become something remarkable, unpredictable in the best possible way. You are no longer a predictable system. People cannot identify which emotional lever will move you because you are no longer laying your control panel open for anyone who walks in. And you can feel the difference this creates. Someone speaks to you with disrespect, expecting you to rise to defend yourself, and you simply look at them. You listen. You respond only when and if it serves something. Someone tries to pull you into a spiral of drama, and you observe it from a distance without stepping inside. Someone tests a boundary, and rather than debating the test, you quietly enforce the boundary. That is not coldness. That is discipline. The person who has cultivated this quality is not numb to the world. They have simply stopped handing out the key to their inner state to whoever arrives with enough noise. There is real psychology behind this. The human brain anticipates patterns. When it expects defensiveness and receives stillness, it hesitates. When it expects pleading and encounters quiet confidence, it has to recalibrate. The old dynamic breaks. And when a dynamic breaks, the relationship changes. Epictetus said that it is not what occurs that shapes you, it is the response you choose. That is not instruction to suppress what you feel. It is the invitation to choose your response rather than be driven by it. When you react from impulse, you expose your unresolved tender places. When you respond from intention, you guard them. And guarding your inner world is not the same as hiding. It is sovereignty. Think carefully about how often reaction is used as a form of influence. If someone can provoke your anger, they experience a sensation of power. If they can stir your jealousy, they feel desired. If they can generate anxiety in you, they feel significant. Reaction becomes a form of validation for the person doing the provoking. But when you stop reacting in the expected way, you quietly withdraw that validation. You do not nourish the behavior that is designed to control you. You do not feed the ego that arrived hoping to see you flinch. You remain at your center. And that center, calm, undisturbed, consistent, is what generates genuine respect. Not fear, not submission, respect. Because steadiness is rare. Most people are moved by every shift in tone, every delay in response, every change in someone's mood. The person who is not moved commands a different kind of attention. Carl Jung once observed that everything that irritates us about another person points us towards something unresolved within ourselves. Our reactions often reveal far more about our own wounds than they do about the other person's behavior. When a particular tone causes you to feel diminished, there may be an old insecurity being activated. When criticism causes defensiveness, there may be a doubt that was never fully addressed. The stoic discipline of controlled response gives you the space to examine that honestly, rather than projecting it outward in the form of conflict. Instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of defending, you reflect. You ask yourself what was actually touched in you by what just happened. That kind of honest self-inquiry builds you in ways no argument ever could. And that, the quiet strength of understanding yourself better than anyone else does, is the real power of this practice. You are not a reflex. You are a person who chooses. And that choosing, applied consistently, transforms every interaction you have. Many people believe the ultimate display of strength is the perfect response, the sharp, well-timed reply that leaves the room without an answer. But that is surface power. The real power is in the pause that most people do not know exists, the pause that, when practiced, rewires your entire relationship with yourself and with others. When you pause, even for just 2 or 3 seconds, you interrupt the automatic script that has been playing inside you without your awareness. The script that whispers, "Make sure they like you, do not let there be tension, fix this quickly, say something that reassures them." Most of us have been running that script for so long that we do not even register it as a choice. We experience it as instinct. But the pause reveals that it is not instinct, it is conditioning. And conditioning can be changed. That small gap between what you receive and how you respond is where discipline is constructed. In the beginning, it feels awkward. You are used to the speed of quick reaction, the fast apology, the immediate explanation, the reflexive defense. But when you hold the pause, something physiological changes. Your nervous system begins to learn something new, that the discomfort of an unresolved moment will not destroy you, that you do not need to rush to manage another person's emotional state. And in that pause, your energy shifts direction. Instead of leaning forward into the interaction to secure approval, you settle back into yourself. You breathe. You observe what is actually happening. Then you decide, deliberately, from your own grounded place, what to do next. Epictetus said that the person who has not mastered themselves is not free. Freedom in this context does not refer to external circumstances. It refers to the interior space between what happens and what you choose to do about it. Mastery begins precisely in that space. The moment you stop automatically surrendering your response to whoever provoked you is the moment you begin to govern yourself. Something else occurs when you become comfortable with silence. Other people, who are not comfortable with it, begin to fill it. They speak more. They explain more. They reveal things they had not planned to share. Not because you are engineering this deliberately, but because silence creates a kind of uncertainty that most people cannot hold without moving to resolve it. We are wired to close open gaps. When you do not rush to close them, the conversational dynamic shifts completely. You are no longer the one leaning forward seeking connection, and the person across from you begins to feel that. Calm, held steadily, functions like a mirror. It reflects back whatever the other person is carrying. If they arrive anxious, that anxiety becomes more visible against the backdrop of your stillness. If they arrive with aggression, the aggression looks disproportionate next to your composure. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that his power existed over his own mind, not over external events. The pause is how that truth is lived in practice. It is how you protect the inner territory from being invaded by every passing external impulse. And this calm steadiness, this unhurried quality in how you hold a moment, is what many people experience as somehow intimidating, even when you have no such intention. It signals that you do not require the moment to resolve in your favor in order to stay centered. In a world where emotional display is constant and immediate, the person who waits and thinks before responding stands apart, not because they are louder, but because they are not scrambling. This is not trained numbness. You still feel things: irritation, disappointment, excitement, frustration. The distinction is that you allow those feelings to move through you before you act on them. You do not become your emotion. You experience it, acknowledge it, and then decide what it actually deserves from you. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in what we imagine than in what is real. Much of our fastest, most damaging reactions are rooted in imagined scenarios. We assume rejection before any evidence of it arrives. We brace for attack before anything has been thrown. The pause disrupts that imagination. It gives you the moment to ask whether what you are reacting to is what is actually happening, or a story your mind has constructed from habit. Often, when you slow down enough to look clearly, the story dissolves. Over time, this becomes your natural pace. The pause is no longer something you consciously impose. It becomes the default rhythm of how you engage. You stop needing to prevail in every exchange. You stop feeling the urgency to correct every misunderstanding in real time. You let some things pass without responding. You allow some tension to exist without rushing to dissolve it. And in doing so, you build a quiet authority that does not need to announce itself. People sense that you cannot be easily rattled, that you are not desperate to maintain peace at any cost to yourself. And that changes, in subtle but significant ways, how they engage with you. There is a level of this that goes deeper than behavior, and it is important to spend time here, because without this understanding, the practices we have been discussing become techniques, and techniques that are disconnected from genuine inner development can be sensed immediately. People know when someone is performing detachment, while underneath they are desperate for the outcome. Real coldness, the kind that carries actual power, is not a technique. It is detachment from outcomes, and that distinction changes everything. The mind operating from desperation speaks a particular language. I need this to work. I need them to respond. I need to be chosen. I need this deal to go through. I need their validation. The moment your relationship to something shifts from preference to necessity, something internal tightens. Your posture changes, though you may not notice it. Your tone changes, though you believe it sounds casual. Your patience disappears, though you try to appear relaxed. And you begin to quietly negotiate against your own interests before anyone else has even entered the room. You accept treatment you know is beneath you. You lower the bar because the alternative, losing the opportunity, feels worse than remaining in discomfort. You say yes while everything in you is saying no, and the people across from you, whether they articulate it or not, can feel the fear underneath. They can sense that you will not walk away. And once they sense that, your leverage disappears. Neediness rarely announces itself with drama. Often it conceals itself inside what looks like flexibility, patience, or generosity. But it carries a scent. It communicates that you will accept less than you deserve because you cannot afford to be without. Detachment communicates something entirely different. It says, I would like this, but I am not built upon it. I value this, but I will not trade my self-respect for it. That message does not need to be spoken. It is carried in posture, in tone, in the ease with which you let a conversation breathe. It signals that you are complete enough to walk away, if walking away is what integrity requires. Seneca wrote that the brave person is free. That courage, here, is not about confrontation or hardness. It is the courage to release what is not aligned with who you are, to trust that your worth does not depend on any single outcome staying in your favor. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean you have stopped caring. It means you have stopped begging. You have stopped tying your sense of self to the movement of external things. When someone does not reply, you do not spiral. When someone makes a different choice, you do not collapse. When an opportunity closes, you do not take it as evidence of your inadequacy. You feel the disappointment honestly. You acknowledge it. But you do not allow it to become a verdict. Epictetus said to use well what is within your power and accept what is not. What is in your power is your effort, your character, your response. What belongs to someone else is their decision. Once that is genuinely understood, not just intellectually, but felt in the body, you stop chasing influence where it does not belong to you. There is a particular kind of freedom that opens up in this place. When you are detached from how something resolves, you speak with greater honesty because you are not afraid of losing the conversation. You hold your position more clearly because you are not terrified of the relationship fracturing. You love with more openness because you are not clinging to another person as your only evidence of your own worth. Detachment removes the fog that desperation creates. You begin to see situations for what they are, not through the distorted lens of what you are hoping they will become. Jung said that the greatest privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But most people forfeit that privilege because they are too invested in securing outcomes that confirm their worth from outside. They reshape themselves to earn acceptance. They bend to receive approval. Detachment is the moment you begin to stand in who you are without waiting for the world to confirm it. You stop twisting yourself to fit. You stop shrinking to be selected. You remain as you are. And paradoxically, that groundedness, that refusal to perform, becomes far more magnetic than any performance could. What some people call the cold mindset is not really about exclusion. It is the practice of selective access. It is the deliberate decision to stop rewarding behavior that costs you your peace. It is the discipline to stop presenting your own limits as something requiring permission. That shift is quiet, but it is profound. Instead of constructing elaborate justifications for your no, you let it stand on its own. Instead of surrounding every refusal with layers of apology and softening, you simply say what is true and allow the space that follows to exist without rushing to fill it. That does not work for me. I am not available for that. No. Direct language, simple language, and then you allow it to land. No theater, no manufactured coldness, just clarity. And clarity, delivered from a grounded place, carries a weight that performance never can. When you begin practicing this, it will feel unnatural. There will be a pull in your chest to add more, to smooth the moment, to ensure the other person still feels warmly toward you. That pull is old learning. It is the part of you that discovered early on that love came more easily when you were agreeable, that safety felt more secure when you avoided friction. But safety that is built on the erasure of your own needs is not safety. It is a different kind of vulnerability, the vulnerability of someone who cannot afford to be honest. Boundaries disrupt that old pattern. They require you to sit with a small discomfort in the present moment in exchange for something more durable: respect, alignment, genuine connection built on truth rather than performance. Jung said that the unconscious pattern, left unexamined, will run your life, and you will experience it as fate. Many people describe it exactly that way. They say they always attract the same kind of draining dynamic, the same disrespect, the same feeling of being undervalued. But it is rarely fate. It is access. It is the unexamined habit of allowing certain behaviors to enter without resistance, of giving the benefit of the doubt past the point where doubt has already been resolved. When you bring that habit into clear awareness, you begin to see your own patterns honestly. You notice how frequently you have let things slide that you knew in the moment were not right. How many times you have accommodated what you did not actually agree with. And once you see it, you have the choice to do differently. Boundaries are not declarations. They do not require an audience. You enforce them through consistent, quiet action. When someone repeatedly contacts you at hours that drain you, you stop being available at those hours. When someone speaks to you in a way that diminishes you, you shorten the conversation or you end it. When someone attempts to create artificial urgency to pressure your response, you take exactly the time you need. These actions teach without explaining. They communicate without lecturing. Over time, the people who are capable of genuine respect will adjust. The ones who cannot will drift. And that drifting is not loss. It is your environment becoming more aligned with who you actually are. The Stoics understood that governing oneself is the foundation of all freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if it is not right, you should not do it. If it is not true, you should not say it. Boundaries are that principle in practice. They are not stubbornness, they are integrity. And integrity carries a particular quality: measured, steady, unmoved by pressure. What others often read as coldness in someone who holds firm is actually just alignment. The alignment between what they feel and what they do, between what they believe and how they behave. That alignment is rare, and because it is rare, it stands out. There is also something practical worth naming. When you stop dispersing your time and energy automatically, their value naturally increases. Not as strategy, but as effect. When your presence is no longer assumed, it becomes intentional. When people can no longer predict your availability, they begin to notice when you choose to show up. And you notice something in yourself as well. You feel less resentment, less depletion, because you are giving from choice rather than from the fear of what happens if you do not. Your yes becomes meaningful again, because it is no longer the default answer to everything. Boundaries, practiced consistently, do not push away the people who matter. They create the conditions in which genuine connection can exist. When disrespect is no longer tolerated, respect has space to grow. When you stop agreeing to everything, the things you agree to carry real weight. Seneca wrote that the person who respects themselves is protected from others. Self-respect begins with the honest acknowledgement that your energy is not infinite, that your peace has real value, that your time is not a shared resource that anyone can access simply by asking. Here is where it becomes critical to slow down, because this is the part most people misunderstand. Coldness without warmth becomes hollow, and hollowness, if it is left to grow without examination, curdles into bitterness. The goal of everything we have explored here is not to become unreachable. It is not to construct such thick barriers that nothing and no one can touch you. The goal is to become someone whose warmth means something, because it is offered by choice, not extracted by demand. Someone whose kindness is real because it comes from genuine care, not from fear of what happens if it is withheld. When people first encounter ideas about emotional detachment and controlled presence, their imagination often goes immediately to images of coldness in the harsh, inhuman sense of someone who has shut themselves off from feeling. But that is not what this is describing. That is not mastery. That is avoidance. True self-governance is not permanent ice. It is controlled temperature, the ability to choose how warm you are, when, and toward whom, from a place of clarity rather than compulsion. Stoicism never taught people to stop loving or stop caring. It taught them to love without making their love into a form of begging, to give without collapsing into resentment, to help without turning themselves into an open resource that anyone can draw from without consequence. You can hold great warmth and still have clear limits. You can be generous and still protect your time. You can be deeply compassionate and still refuse to accept treatment that diminishes you. When your warmth is no longer automatic, no longer a reflex you cannot control, it becomes something that people actually feel, because it is now a choice. When you give someone your attention, and they have earned it through consistency and genuine respect, that attention lands differently. It carries the weight of something real, something intentional. When you offer support to someone who has stood with you honestly, that support has a quality that support given out of obligation never could. Marcus Aurelius wrote to stop debating what a good person looks like and simply be one. Being good does not require being endlessly available to everyone. It requires acting from principle, giving from a place of genuine integrity rather than hidden insecurity. And that integrity is what prevents this path from sliding into emotional emptiness. Coldness without principle is just shutdown. Coldness with principle is clarity. It is the decision not to dissolve under pressure, not to chase someone who has made clear through their behavior that they see you as secondary. When you stop pursuing those dynamics, something quieter and more revealing happens. You begin to notice who stays without being followed, who makes space for you without being asked, who demonstrates value without needing to be reminded. That awareness shapes your environment in ways that no argument ever could. When warmth is constant and automatic, it becomes invisible. It is part of the furniture. But when it is intentional, when it is offered only where it is genuinely met, it carries a completely different quality. It is felt. It lingers. And something in you begins to change as well. You start to respect yourself in a way that was not available before, because you are no longer giving the most genuine parts of yourself away carelessly. You are being thoughtful. You are being discerning. You are aligned with what you actually value. Epictetus taught that freedom lives in what is within your power and in releasing what is not. Your warmth is within your power. Where you choose to direct it is within your power. You do not owe it universally. And choosing carefully, making warmth earned rather than assumed, prevents the slow accumulation of resentment that forms when you give generously to those who give nothing in return. There is something profoundly magnetic about a person who has found steadiness. Not dramatic emotional highs, not volatility that keeps everyone around them off balance. Just steadiness, the quality of remaining grounded while everything around them fluctuates. In a world of constant, immediate reaction, a person like this is conspicuous. They do not swing between extremes. They do not pour their emotional state into every interaction. they simply remain. That quality of presence communicates safety and strength simultaneously. It is rare. And what is rare naturally draws attention, not because it seeks to, but because the contrast is undeniable. But the purpose is not to draw attention. The purpose is to protect alignment. When you are steady, your decisions come from clarity rather than panic. You respond from your own center rather than from wherever the pressure is coming from. You give because you want to, not because you are afraid of what withholding will cost you. And that changes the nature of every relationship you are part of. You are no longer negotiating for approval. You are participating from a place of genuine strength. As this becomes more practiced, you find that the moments of intentional holding back, the selective warmth, the quiet restraint, actually make your genuine warmth more available in the moments that matter most. Because it is no longer diluted across every interaction, regardless of whether it is deserved. It is concentrated, focused, directed where it will actually mean something. That focus restores something in you. It clears the resentment that accumulates when you give without return. It prevents the slow erosion that comes from spending your best energy in places that cannot receive it. The person who learns to hold this balance is not less connected to humanity. They are more deliberately connected. They can be fully present in conflict without being swept away by it. They can offer genuine warmth without losing themselves in the giving. They are not chasing people who hesitate to move toward them. They are not performing steadiness. They have built it. And in a world that rarely slows down long enough to find its own ground, that built, genuine, unperforming steadiness is something people feel in their bodies when they are near it. It is not loud. It does not arrive with announcement. But it is unmistakable. Coldness and warmth, held in the right balance, are not contradictions. They are complementary. One protects the space in which the other becomes meaningful. Together they create something that cannot be manufactured, a presence that is both strong and real, controlled and human, grounded and open. When that balance is found, you stop being pulled apart by the world. You hold. You remain yourself. And that, the simple daily practice of remaining yourself with clarity and without apology, is what strength has always actually been. It is not about closing your heart. It is about holding it steadily enough that you can choose when and where and to whom it opens. When you have built that, when that becomes genuinely yours, you stop being moved by every wind. You stop collapsing under every pressure. You become the kind of presence that others feel without being able to explain exactly why. And you know it too. Not because someone told you, but because you can feel it from the inside. If what we have explored here spoke to something real in you, there is another video waiting that will take this even deeper, into the specific practices of building unshakable inner strength from the ground up. Watch it next. Stay on this path, and thank you for being a part of Saint.